Thank you, Linda. And thank you all. We are very excited to be bringing together some of the threads of thinking that have been shared across this day of rich discussion and sharing. This session we wanted to, and it's a group of us who have put this together, as Linda was mentioning, we have a bit of a project that we're looking to develop, and that project is looking at integrating multiple perspectives from across the professional ecosystem, the education ecosystem, to try and look at the culture surrounding professional education that sits within, particularly in Australia. So the 8 names that appear on screen at the moment, and we wanted to acknowledge all of our partners who have brought us together for some of this excellent thinking, come from 4 different states of Australia. They come from a number of different learning area backgrounds, because as we've heard through different presentations today, this isn't a problem that at the moment is owned by anyone in particular. It's owned by so many different places, so many different groups. So for this session, we wanted to acknowledge all of the thinking that has happened through the day, all the thinking that people have been sharing, the wonderful research perspectives, and then give us an opportunity to start to think, well, where would the future go if we removed some of the constraints of our contexts? Now, to do that, we also didn't want to just start from the big picture. We wanted to acknowledge where we'd come from. Before we move too far in, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands upon which we are meeting today, and I'm presenting from, which is the Yagara and Turrbal people up here in the space otherwise known as Queensland. And I want to pay my respects to elders past and present. It is a difficult time, and I want to acknowledge the honour and honour the wisdom of the elders who are at the moment in a period of quiet reflection. It's difficult to acknowledge today, but at the same time, I do wish to do that in this space. So for this session, we want to consider the complex problem of out-of-field teaching and teacher shortage, because clearly in half an hour we'll be able to wrap it all up, fix it, and it will be off again with new problems to start to solve. No, this is a thought around the creativity we can bring to this problem. Without leaps of imagination or dreaming, we lose the excitement of possibilities. And so we want to bring possibilities to the research place as well. So we're going to invite you, after we give a little bit of context, we're going to invite you to share possibilities, endless possibilities, imagining of how we could go about working through the sticky question that comes with professional learning in this space. Because even in the last couple of this afternoon's presentations, we've talked about all sorts of complex issues and policy environments that end up shaping some of the things that we might like to do to support teachers who are teaching out of field. At the beginning of the day, Linda shared a QR code with you and asked some questions. I know a few of you, and I thank you very much for sharing with us. At the moment, we have a little map that looks a bit like this. If you have a chance to, and you've dropped your pin on there but haven't answered the questions, we'd love for you to go in and answer the questions. There is a little red pin in the middle of the North Pacific Ocean, which has all the questions in there in case you have lost track of the questions that we were asking. So please feel free to add some more to the richness of that map. So we want to create a bit of a geographic heat map out of that information, and certainly be able to share that back with the audience and the group. But we did that to acknowledge all of the rich research that has happened and that has been shared to this point. And we wanted to give you a few little contextual pieces to shape some thinking, and then ask you some questions around what could be the possibilities, where could it be next, and engage in this imaginarium together. So while our research comes very much from the OOFTAS collective perspective, we did want to acknowledge as well some of the work that that our other partners here in the conference have been sharing in this space too. The report on the 2022 Transforming Education Summit, convened by the UN Secretary General, put together 4 wonderful, sorry, my computer's just decided to have a little moment. Bless its cotton socks. 4 areas of action that we can think about and work towards in transforming education. 2 of them in particular talk to the sorts of reasons why this is such an important question. That first one around the learning environment must be supportive and of the development of all learners. And we heard in presentations today that what happens if we have the teachers who don't feel confident in those space, what that looks like in a classroom and how they feel as they try to catch up at times to be supportive of their learners. So if we're transforming education, this out of field phenomenon is part of the process of developing that support for all learners. And certainly as we empower and transform the teachers as they work towards being agents of change. Susan, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, evening, everybody, again. Building on from the slide that Emily just showed, we were really struck by one of the quotes in there as well from UNESCO that talked about the teachers we need for the education that we want. And I guess it's become very clear to us that we all need our teachers to be adaptive and responsive to the out-of-field teaching situation, but we also need them to be supported. And this is where I guess the Imaginarium comes in, because whilst we've heard a number of potential solutions and actual solutions that are working in our various contexts, we know that there are so many more possibilities. Some of the literature that's here today, we're drawing from international and Australian scholarship, but I think it's been pretty clear throughout today that here in Australia anyway, and I know elsewhere in the world, we are really grappling with this idea of a teacher shortage, or the reality of a teacher shortage, and then the implications of that upon teaching beyond your subject specialisation. A recent teacher workforce data, a report that was issued nationally, gave us some broad statistics here around what out-of-field teaching looks like in some of our key learning areas. Of course, if you drill down further into the specifics of humanities subjects or particular sciences, you know, different sets emerge. But I think the big picture is that out-of-field teaching is a concern and it's not going away, and we need to develop some strategies to respond to it. Ultimately, you know, we acknowledge that there are some implications for subject, for teachers and for students that arise from out-of-field teaching. And we heard from Minda Lopez and her colleague in absentia, Jim van Overschild, this morning about the low academic performance of students who are taught by those out-of-field. We know from the literature and we know from our experiences often that out-of-field teaching contributes to an increased attrition rate. And we also know that the teachers themselves are finding ways to adapt and respond and build their confidence. So altogether, I guess the problems and the challenges associated with out-of-field teaching really call us to look very critically and positively and imaginatively and creatively about how we can upskill teachers, also how we can get teachers into the profession at times more quickly and with support, and also the importance of funding and policy models and leadership practices, and what is it that we could do from our context to agitate and to just kind of, you know, shake those bars a bit further and demand that some change occurs to be able to help us to respond and to support those who are teaching beyond their specialisation. And on the next slide, Emily, on the next slide, I guess we know that out-of-field teaching is diverse. It affects different states across Australia in different ways. It affects different countries in a variety of ways. And those who are teaching out of field are also diverse. Therefore, we really need, as the scholars and the leaders in the field, and of those of us who are in schools and in policy settings, we need to be adaptive and responsive. We need to consider what needs to happen to qualifications and specialisations. We need to be able to ensure that, you know, what a teacher is trained to teach forms a big part of their teaching load and subject allocation as much as possible. We need to, and we've heard about today, the ways in which teachers develop their subject identity and capability within subjects, A, that they're specialised in, but B, that they're learning to teach through this out-of-field phenomenon. We want to look at pathways to becoming in field, whether that becomes through a piece of paper that says you are now qualified to teach this subject, or whether it emerges through the person themselves being able to say that they're feeling like a teacher of this subject and they're starting to feel more within the field than outside it. Those two things are also really critical to look at, and things that the presentations touched on today. Of course, a big focus of this particular project that Emily mentioned, that many of us around the room here are involved in, and many of us are actually all grappling with in different ways beyond the formality of this particular project, is the culture of support and the role that the school plays in being able to release teachers to be able to you know, participate in qualification, upskilling, professional learning type models, and what is it that actually generates and propels a teacher forward and gives them the confidence to teach something that they may not necessarily have been trained in. And so we come to some other literature led by Linda and others in the field that helps us to understand more clearly what it is that out-of-field teachers need to learn. We've heard about this idea of boundary crossing, okay? And we've also heard through a number of presentations about the importance of reflection and being reflexive. So that is that the teachers themselves, the practitioners themselves, have a structure to work within to reflect on their own practice, to develop plans for going forward, and to come back and circulate through that process and go again. With the input and guidance and support of expert others. We're also starting to learn that sometimes the discipline can look a little bit different in a school subject context. So it's being able to articulate what the distinctive core of a discipline looks like and how that translates into a school setting. We need to make sure that we've got translatable and transferable elements, so that things that may work quite well for us within a science or mathematics out-of-field setting could also be transferred and adapted across into settings where teachers are perhaps working more within humanities-focused subjects. And also we need to ask the question about what is it that secondary teachers need to learn and know and be able to do when they're teaching a new subject. So all of these four elements here, they all kind of weave in and out of each other. They're all equally important, but when we put these teachers at the heart of our, you know, decision making and our actions and our research design, ultimately we hope that a supportive and responsive element will emerge.
So we wanted, as I said before, we wanted to do a bit of imagining, because we've had some time to really reflect on and think about some of the research that has been shared during today. All right, so if we were in a no constraints, so no policy constraints, no legislation, no financial, no requirements around hours, all those sorts of things, how should the out of field phenomenon be approached? We're going to start by asking you from your research context how you would, what would be your next step? What would you be heading for or advocating for if you had that ear of your government, your context, your up here it would be the College of Teachers who make the decisions about who is registered, who's not, and otherwise. So what would that look like? Where would you want to go? So only willingly, I absolutely concur, because that was talked about in a couple of presentations this afternoon around that identity factor. There is one thing to be said about the qualification. There's a completely different part to the teacher actually feeling that they are at ease in the space, that they wish to be in the space. That is something that they would like to do instead of something that needs to be done in order to fulfill an obligation for a teaching area. Janet, Susan and I met this morning and were sharing all sorts of stories of various things that we've been required to teach over our time as teachers. With mentorship.
And I really like this idea here about being prepared to teach out of field before they enter the profession, you know, and before they are teaching out of field. And I think that that's something that's really, for us in Australia, it was a really clear recommendation that came out of our national summit a couple of years ago, that, you know, it compels initial teacher education providers to really sort of take a stand and see what can be done within that space to equip the next generation of teachers moving forward, whilst we also know there's things in place to support those who are experiencing it now. Sorry, Emily, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. That's the whole part of this was going to be a back and forth with Janet as well. So I think we're all on track. But is there anyone, because we want to extend the microphone as well, not just the technology, but is there anyone who would like to share something a bit broader or further that's not, you know, doesn't have the text requirements? We want to take away all those boundaries, and that's going to include the number of characters that you can put into a response. So if there's anyone who wants to share with us anything or so thinking that they've had or some experiences.
Are people at the TEC able to click into the Slido?
If not, we very much welcome your thoughts if you want to talk through with us instead.
Could I say something? Russell Tyler here. Sorry, I've been in and out all day a bit, but I think it's important to recognise that a particular discipline isn't set in stone. And when we think about training people or supporting people to teach in a particular discipline, it's not a fixed thing. And that teachers from out of field can bring all sorts of strengths into a discipline. And that, in fact, we found in our course, a science course at Deakin, what we're attempting to do is not to necessarily just duplicate standard practice in the classroom, but trying to equip these out of field teachers to be, in a sense, reform oriented and recognise wider aspects of teaching science. So I think it's not simply a matter of imposing a strict disciplinary perspective.
Absolutely, Russell. We've all as researchers found opportunities to try different methodologies at times, and that's made for a richer picture and a richer lens on what we're looking at. So and it's the same in a school, to have that different perspective, a different way of collecting evidence of student work sometimes opens up a realm of possibility. So being able to share those practices and ideas and building from the strengths of that the teachers are bringing with them, if they're wishing to look at a different field. Other thoughts or ideas would anyone like to share?
Okay.
Yeah, in our country, teachers out of field have to take the course, which is, it depends on the areas, but it's from 556 hours to 1,200 something. And they mainly focus on the theory, like the subject itself, while with this shift to active learning, with this shift from a teacher to teacher facilitator, what is the most important is not what teachers teach, but what students learn. So just from today's presentations, also one of my insights was actually to try to convince people to, if we, of course, we need to think and to plan properly, to move from the knowledge-based to skills-based through with the focus on student centered learning. But in general, this was very much, I'd say, lots of information and lots of research data and findings. So if we were not very active asking the questions, just accept it as we are trying to digest, because everything was too much and too quickly. It's very important that we have the access to the materials, to the presentations, and later on I hope we will have a chance to communicate further on this. It's really something which is very important for all teachers and for all education systems of the country.
Absolutely. Sorry.
I think that's like was alluded to by my senior colleague here, that the phenomenon seems to be new. Some parts of that's part of the participants who are here. It may mean different things and may have different technologies in different countries. So whichever way you look at it, I am of the opinion that if there are no regulations governing these practices, then it is going to affect children who are supposed to get these specialized teachers to deliver lessons in the various countries. So everyone must look at ways of getting their acts together in order to have to govern it, irrespective of which part of the group you find yourself. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Please. Yeah, I tend to agree with my colleague here, Dr. Sam. Of course, there is a reason why perhaps that undergraduate degree program, teacher education, was allocated in 4 years. There is a reason for that. And therefore, this concept of out of field, don't you think at one point somebody may just take it as a shortcut and say, oh, overnight, let me think about going for out of field as a teacher, because I think I'm gonna be placed in teaching. Maybe I've been so desperate out there, I did not get employment, and therefore, let me go for this option. My thinking.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think there's be a number of young up and coming teachers who would feel that same way, that it's about ensuring that I have the role, whatever the role might look like straight away, and then hopefully I can work towards the future I'm looking for. Thank you all for sharing. We in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving us on, but we really only have, hopefully, there it is, last slide. And that's to thank you for the contributions you've made, because of course, as we say, this is about transforming lives.
Thank you, Emily and Susan, for running that session. I think that was a really terrific way to just pull together the key ideas that we've sort of looked at today. And I'd be very interested to get more insights from the people in the room at the TEC, and hopefully you can capture some of that in the report, Ming, because I think knowing the value of our research and our activities and our insights and how useful that is for people in other contexts is really valuable for us. So look, thank you very, very much for having us along to your project. And we do hope that we have contributed substantially to your thinking, particularly in this area of teacher education and for those teachers who find themselves teaching out of field. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Linda, can I give some final remarks? Okay.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Linda. I think I should give my strong appreciation to you and to all the other colleagues from OOFT collectives. Thank you so much for your wonderful and expressive presentations. And I think that today's symposium is just the beginning. It's just the beginning of a long friendship. And I think that in the future, we will have a lot of opportunities to collaborate together. And I think I would like to propose 3 initiatives. The first initiative is because today's symposium that most of the presentations are from the developing countries. I think maybe next time I would like the developing countries to share their experience of teaching. Okay, this is my first initiative. And then my second initiative is about the methodology. Because during the lunchtime, I talked with several other colleagues from the Belt and Road initiatives. They are from like Ghana, from Fiji, from Nepal, from many developing countries. They are very interested in how this impressive research has been done. So I would like to propose that maybe next we can have a methodology session and to let the researchers to show how this wonderful, excellent research has been done step by step. Okay, this is my my second initiative. And my last initiative, like what Madam has just mentioned, that now we really have some desire in the developing countries to really need some help from the scholars. So we propose we together to have some on-site activities to go to the developing countries in person and to see their problems and to solve try to solve the problems and to really give some to put some effort to help them to solve their problems. These are the 3 my initiatives. But in the end, I propose a warm applause to all the